Hi, and welcome to the It's Gonna Be All Right podcast, a podcast about life challenges, adversities, but also a podcast about believing in yourself and your resiliency. And with a little love, faith, and joy, it's gonna be all right. Thank you so much for joining today. Very humbled and grateful that you took some time out of your day again to listen. I can't believe I've been doing this podcast for more than 5 or 6 episodes. Never thought I'd be a podcaster, and yet here we are. So, thank you so much for those of you that have been listening continuously. For those of you that have, you've seen how a lot of the themes from not only myself, but from some of the guests that have been on this podcast so far has been about the power of connection and community and love and support from your family members, your friends, and all of those around you in your social network. I think for me, I've always been a member of a team. I've always felt such pride of being a part of a team, whether it was being younger and going through, elementary school to being on athletic teams, then continuing on in adulthood and thinking about in different careers and being on teams. And it wasn't until I got diagnosed with cancer in last year that I really saw the power of what a team is. See, I'd usually always led from the front, where this was the first time, especially in my adult life, where I had to take a step back and be a part of a team, but not really have a whole lot of control of what was happening on the team. And for those of you that know a lot about my cancer journey, you know that it didn't start off on the best foot. I guess no cancer journey really does. But I didn't feel like my first group of oncologists and doctors really had my back. So today it is my pleasure to welcome my oncologist, Dr. Sam Klempner, to the podcast. I was very fortunate to end up getting a second opinion and landing in his office of March of last year. And I knew the second I literally met him that I was in the right place at the right time. And there was a reason why my first experience probably wasn't the best, that it wasn't where I was supposed to be. So I'm super fortunate to have him on the show today. Extremely grateful that I've known him for the past year and has helped me along on this journey from the very beginning when it looked a little dark to now at the continuing on where it looks a lot brighter and lighter. So I'm going to brag on you for a second because you're not on social media, and I feel like you never brag about yourself. But so impressive, all the things that you've done, starting off doing your fellowships, your residencies at Brigham and Women's and Beth Israel, both affiliated with the Harvard Medical School, which is truly amazing, and really spending a lot of time with your work and target or talking about specializing in targeted therapies, which I really believe for me has made such a drastic difference in my journey. So not only you're super busy at Mass General and everything you do there, you are a member of numerous oncology research societies, an active member of American. I had to write this down because this is like a mouthful and tongue twister. American Society of Clinical Oncology, and you're even on their trial tumor board. And in the free time that you don't have, you're on the advisory board of two amazing nonprofits, Debbie's Dream Foundation and Hope for Stomach Cancer. So, I mean, and I could go on for probably like the rest of the podcast and share all of the articles and journals and everything that you've written and how you've helped so many people. But I thought one of the amazing things about reading your bio was the awards that you've received from your patient care. And I think that is, among all those accolades, just so important and something so special to have on there too, because there is so much more than just being a doctor. Having that bedside manner, which you totally do, is so helpful. So huge welcome to the podcast. I'm so grateful that you took some time out today to share it with us.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you for the very kind intro. Yeah, my mom was a nurse at Mass General, so I learned very early on where I actually stood on the totem pole, which is not at the top. Uh, yeah, totally a team sport.
I love it. And I think, yeah, that was one thing as soon as I walked in your office and I was sitting in there already and you walked in and you just said, "Hi, I'm Sam." And I just felt like that heavy, like weight on my shoulders just lifted. And I was like, okay, like I'm in the right spot. And then you just took out a piece of paper and you were like, All right, I still have this. I should have had it as a visual, but I still have that piece of paper sitting on my desk. And you said to me, like, all right, here's the standard of care that you've been offered, but here are your other three options. And you spent a lot of time writing them out and explaining them to me. And it just made such a world of difference for me. And I know, my dad's sitting there too after being in some of the other appointments. It was drastically different.
Yeah, I think we know what we get from standard of care, and none of us who do research in this area, want to be writing standard of care. It's the standard, so it's the best, but our job is not to give standard, it's to try to make new standards and improve upon what's out there, and that's what clinical trials are for and research is for. So yeah, we try to offer every patient at every point in their journey something if we can. We don't always have something to offer, but we'll always try.
So I think that's very important because I mean, I really believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the trial that I was on, definitely helped me in this journey, and I qualified for it and was very grateful that I was able to sneak in on it. So just can you just go over like on a super high level, how patients go about finding doctors that have the clinical trials that could be available to them?
Yeah, I wish there was an easy way to do this and a better system, Um, Unfortunately, access to clinical trials is not distributed in a way where everyone can have it. It's just the way it is. It's generally concentrated in bigger academic research hospitals, which is why there's probably an advantage for any cancer patient at some point to be seen in a big center. Not don't need to get their care there, but just to have an understanding of meeting with people who have their fingertips on the sort of the pulse of like what trials are available is often a big advantage because those are the people that are going to know what's going on. I think when we see patients, it's kind of like, you know, buying a used car or a house. It's like you're not going to go buy a used car without an inspection. And we feel the same way about a tumor. Like you shouldn't really start treatment without an inspection. And the inspections that we do are like look under the microscope at the tumor, look at all the targets that are available, and see do we have anything that makes sense. And thankfully, in stomach and esophagus cancers, we're finding more targets and we're getting drugs that hit those targets. So more and more of the time, the answer is yes. I've been doing this for like 15 years, and 15 years ago, most of the time, we didn't have targets to look for, and even if we found them, we didn't have drugs to hit them. So it was a lot more just regular old chemo.
Yeah.
Now we're getting better at that because we know what to look for, and we're having more and more drugs. So getting to a place with clinical trials is very important. I think advocacy groups serve a big role in connecting patients with each other and also with, here's centers. There's a lot of big places. They're mostly in bigger cities, Boston, New York, Houston, San Francisco, etc., where big cancer centers exist that are going to have access to the trials.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one thing being on some of these different Facebook groups and hearing from other patients that I'm very fortunate. And, a lot of us that live around Boston talk about it all the time that we're super fortunate that we are in this area, that there is the medical help. And there's been a lot of people that have come from outside of Boston to this area for our hospitals. So something very special about living in Massachusetts and especially in the Boston area. We have amazing healthcare facilities.
Yeah, very, very fortunate, very, very lucky. We we try to get trials out to patients where they live, when it's possible. Some of these new drugs, really do require some additional monitoring and learning and managing side effects. So unfortunately, there's not a great way around getting to a place that does it. I mean, I think we often don't appreciate how big of a commitment it is from patients to do a clinical trial. Some clinical trials more so than others. The trial you're on is the same schedule as what you would get, meaning the drugs are given every 2 weeks. which is nice. It's very practical. But some trials, we have patients that are here every week for a month, and they're coming, 6, 8 hours each way. Like that's something that we don't do a great job accounting for, It's like our treatment might be 60 minutes and we're like, hey, it's only a 60-minute treatment. And then they're like, well, it's a 24-hour day for me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's so true. I remember the first time, I think it was because I had to get my blood drawn after certain hours of getting the trial drug. I think I was in the specialty clinic for like 12 hours that day. And I think now my days from probably like start to finish are anywhere from like 6 to 8
Yeah.
because it takes them so long to, defrost the drug and then mix it and all these things that I guess if you've never been in this world before, you would never think, I just thought you go in there, you get it pumped into your body really fast and you go home. I didn't realize, yeah, sometimes it's a game and my waiting game. And my dad and I joke, on the way home from treatment, sometimes it's like, gosh, we're exhausted. And all we did was sit all day and do nothing. And we're exhausted from sitting all day. So, but it is making me sit here today. So it's all that sitting was totally, totally worth it. So you mentioned a little bit about your mom being a nurse. I'd love for you to share a little bit about your journey and how it's been impactful for you and the things that you learned early on that's helping you be a phenomenal oncologist today.
Yeah, no problem. Cancer touches pretty much everyone at some point, and unfortunately, it touched my family when I was in my 20s. But yeah, my mom was a nurse at Mass General, and then she taught nursing, and my brother and sister and I used to be like, pin cushion dummies for classes and stuff. So I got a lot of exposure, whether I wanted it or not. And then wound up in medical school. And when I was in my second year of medical school, sort of just when we were just learning about like what cancer is and disease processes, it's a crazy thing. I was like literally looking at the page in a textbook about colon cancer, and then my dad called me and was like, your mom's in the hospital. Um, and my mom got diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer when she was 52, 51. That was 17 years ago. And she got treated at Mass General, where she was a nurse and had a great oncologist, who actually still works there, and I still see him, which is small world. But, you know, I learned a lot from going to those visits and sitting by her in the chemo chair. And then, of course, I was, in school and living at home when she was sick. But, my mom only made it like just about a year. Uh, and I think back, and obviously that is a big part of why I became an oncologist, because I was both, like everybody, angry that there wasn't more that they could do. Like, this is one of the best hospitals. My mom went to like, tried trials. And back then, it was stuff that the drugs that you get for standard of care didn't even exist. And so it's much better to have cancer in 2025 than it is in 2005. That's just progress. But yeah, so I decided, in medical school that I wanted to do cancer. I didn't know exactly what cancer. Obviously, I was a little biased because my all my exposure was colon cancer. And then in fellowship, I was doing much more time in the lab and research, and, you know, really wanted my job to focus on research and understanding how our drugs work and how to get better drugs. And then I wound up in stomach cancer because I liked GI cancers. I like the team. It's a big team. You've got surgeon, sometimes you have a radiation person, you have a radiologist, sometimes you've got a nutritionist. So I, like you, really always liked the team. I grew up playing team sports, a lot of sports, stuff like that. So GI is very team-oriented cancer type. And then this is like 2011, 2012. Like, I had seeing more stomach cancer patients in training, and colon cancer was a black box. Stomach cancer was like a total black box. Like, we really didn't know anything. And so I was like, how can we not know anything about this cancer that's at the time was like the second or third most common cancer in the world. And so I was like, this is what I want to do. And I've been doing stomach cancer and esophagus cancer since 2013.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't realize that. Yeah, I knew that it was, a lot of people had it, but I didn't realize it was that high on the list of how many people actually had stomach cancer.
It
Like
still is.
worldwide. That's crazy.
If you look at the top five cancers in the world, obviously breast and prostate and colon and lung are usually the top four, but number five is stomach. Um, Around the world, there's like between stomach and esophagus there's like 1.5 million cases a year. It's a
So
lot.
crazy. Crazy. And I had honestly never really heard of it before
Yeah,
I had it. And then I remember talking to my mom and she was like, "Oh, your great great uncle had it." And I'm like, "Yeah, but that was like probably back in the 50s." So, I wasn't going to compare myself, you know, to someone in their 50s that living in 1950 having it. And he was probably in his 60s or 70s at that
yeah.
point. It's crazy. And I know we've talked about this before, and it's one of the least funded of those top cancers as well, right?
Yeah, it's a very good point and something that, people like myself and others who do research, we rely on the government and other foundations to fund our work. And despite being a very common cancer, historically, like there's some huge breast cancer foundations, Susan Komen, et cetera, that do a wonderful job and give tons and tons of money to breast cancer research. Um, but stomach cancer, just hasn't gotten to the same level of funding despite the fact that there are similar numbers around the world. I mean, advocacy groups play a huge role in pushing the government to like give more money to dedicate to stomach and esophagus cancer, and we have made some improvements, but still it's hard to come by money for research.
Yeah, gosh. So yeah, I think that it's crazy and it that kind of brings me to a thought that I had as well. Like, how do your patients help you with your research? Right? Like
Yeah.
how do, I know everyone's story and journey is very different and mine's different from others, but how do patients like myself help you with your research and how you move forward and in your thinking of from a purely research standpoint.
I mean, many, many ways. It can range from obviously participating in clinical trials. That's a huge commitment from a patient to do that. It's a little bit of a leap of faith, jumping into an unknown. And without people participating in clinical trials, we don't ever know if we're making progress. So, clinical participating in clinical trials is a huge way that patients help our research. Um, Also, you're the ones getting the drug. Like, I'm not getting treated. So they also teach us about the drugs. They're like, hey, since I started this drug, I have this side effect, or I noticed this change. And, that's how we learn about our drugs and how to manage the side effects because none of our drugs are perfect.
Right.
Um, we also, have people participating in other things, like when you get a biopsy or when you get a surgery, we ask you if we can keep a piece of it.
Mhm.
And we use that piece to study, like, how come you're doing so well on this drug where another patient might not be doing so well. Without having two pieces of things to compare, it's impossible for us to kind of know that. So that's another big way. And then every once in a while, some patient did really well in life and they have money to contribute to
Yeah.
actually support the research. I mean, that's rare because most people don't have, big chunks of money to give away. But every once in a while that does happen, and those are like transformational gifts. Just to give you a sense, when I do like a project and we're like, hey, let's take a really deep dive in this tumor, it can cost between $5,000 and $20,000 for like just one person's analysis of tumor. That's what the research cost for us to do is. And so you can imagine if you want to study 50 people,
Yeah.
you're into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And, it's not easy to get government grants that chip in that kind of money. So tons and tons of ways. I think the most direct way is basically participating in trials and then telling us about them. And honestly, in tumors that are a little less common in the US, patients also play a huge role in educating each other. Because, I only see the people in front of me who come into my clinic. And then I'll do, some educational webinar or a podcast with you, and maybe I'll reach a few more people. Um, but patients reach a lot of people, like you reach a lot of other patients, I think we get referrals from other patients, hey, maybe this trial, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's another way that patients really help with research is sort of educating each other.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think you're right. I just off of again being on some of those Facebook groups and I genuinely think that the trial drug has helped me. And it's like you hear whenever I hear someone struggling, I'm always in my back of my head, I'm like, gosh, you got to get on this drug. You got to get on this drug. And again, I don't, can I say with 100% certainty it's because of this drug? No, but I've just seen so many other people not have the opportunity and not have the results that I've had that have been, that are my age or maybe even younger women and it didn't or or we're on different one or two different types of chemos and standard of cares and didn't have the results that I did and uh, that makes me almost feel a sense of almost like guilt like that I
Yeah.
had this amazing amazing opportunity that I was in the right place at the right time. So when I do see those people, I do want to be like, just go get this drug somehow, like see if you can get access to it because it's I think it did make a difference.
Yeah, we get that a lot. And, first of all, I'm ha glad that you feel that way because I also think, that clinical trials help. Sometimes they don't help everybody, and that's, a learning experience for us and unfortunate, but, if you don't try, you don't know.
Yeah.
Um, I think as long as we feel like a drug may help and is unlikely to harm, then we feel okay, having that conversation about participating. Uh, a huge area of research is like identifying patients better
Yeah.
and learning from patients. So, you know, we got excited about this trial for you because you had a very high amount of the target.
Hmm.
And we were like, oh, this one makes a lot of sense. We got a drug that hits the target. This person has a lot of the target. In other studies, that has worked out very well. So it wasn't too hard of a stretch to think that you might do well on this. But that's not true for everyone. Some people have like a moderate amount of the target, and we don't know. We think it might, but we don't know. And just like most things in life, you don't know until you try.
Yeah.
But it feels a little more serious when when it's your life.
Right. And I think that's the way I kind of looked at it was like, all right, there's standard of care, but I didn't want to be just a standard of care. Like my goal was not like just to live with this. My goal was to live like be done. Like, okay, this is the part of the journey for right now, and I want to be done with this part of the journey and then move on. And that's for me, it was okay. I really believe, like you said, I had a high marker, so why not do this if it was going to give me a higher chance, I'm all in it. And that's the way I looked at it.
Yeah, I think that's the way we try to educate patients as much as we can so they have the information to make the decision. It's ultimately, their decision at the end of the day. It's also important to understand that, all research is voluntary. You could decide tomorrow when you come in clinic, like, look, I had a change of heart. I don't want to do this trial anymore. And like, no harm, no foul. We're still going to take care of you. I think sometimes people worry that if they don't do something, they're going to let down their team. And like, honestly, we don't think that way at all. Um, I think everybody has their own beliefs and brings their own experience to research.
Yeah.
And it's not my job to say, you need to do this. It's just my job to answer all your questions and give you the information and then, go from there.
Yeah. I think, that reminds me of like, when I went back on the chemo for a couple rounds and you were like, all right, let's try six. And I was like, okay, six. But then six was in my head. And then, a nurse would come in before I would see you and she's like, all right, you're gonna get the bag today. And I'm like, nope, I've done six. Like I'm not getting it. And it's, I think it's definitely it didn't feel like there was ever any pressure. It was like, again, here are your options. Here's what I recommend. But at the end of the day, you need to make the best decision for yourself. But I feel like you did that very like you did it very eloquently talking about here's what I think, here's my advice, but you need to do what you're most comfortable with, moving forward. And I think that was very, very different from my first experience.
Yeah, some of it's just experience, like I think I probably 10 years ago when I was starting out in my career, I probably did it different.
Yeah.
And, I think just like anything, you get better at it over time. You do it more and more, you get better at it. Just like surgeons who operate on our patients, there's people who do a lot of stomach surgery are generally better at it than someone who does one stomach surgery a year. And I think that's the same for pretty much most jobs in
Yeah,
life.
true.
Uh,
Very, very true.
and and yeah, so I'm sure that I've probably changed my style a little bit over the years too.
Nice. Yeah, I meant to say this earlier, but yeah, I thought it was when we talk about like, getting something from surgery and the day after, I think, or 2 days after, you were like, "Can I keep your stomach?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you can have it." Like, what am I going to do with it? So hopefully my stomach gave you something to go with moving forward because I definitely didn't want that sucker back.
Oh, it definitely did. Although you'd be surprised, we get some crazy requests once in a while of people wanting pictures of their stuff
No,
or pieces of their stuff. You never know.
no, I was like, it is all yours. I do not want that thing back. All right, so here's a great question that I got from one of our listeners, and she just battled breast cancer. And she said, "How do you balance setting realistic expectations with patients while also giving them hope?" And I feel like you're very, very good at this. I know
Yeah,
it's a loaded, hard question.
tough question. I mean, you definitely have to be realistic because it's people's lives and they need to plan things, if someone has a limited amount of time, it's only fair for them to know that. But these are huge averages and everybody's very different and we're very bad at predicting outcomes on an individual basis. So I think it's important that patients understand that. We can speak in broad generalities, and then a lot of those things are based on data that's older,
Mhm.
and they don't include people who are on a clinical trial like you're on. So I think that it's hard to say that those numbers apply directly to you. I think we answer the questions that people ask, and if someone asks me like, "What is my chance of being alive in 5 years?" I would tell them my best guess. But it's also a moving target. If you start out in one place and then you have a great response to a therapy, you probably move on that, spectrum of how you're going to be. So I think it's important to not have it be a one-time
Yeah.
conversation. That changes over time, and that's where the hope is. You can start out behind the eight ball in a tough spot, and then you can wind up doing great.
Mhm.
And that's what we hope for all of our patients, and that's why we try to be aggressive when people are willing to be aggressive. Obviously patients have to be willing to go through stuff. But yeah, it is definitely a continuous relationship and conversation that happens over years. There's no need to beat people over the head with bad news. They know that cancer is serious. It's not like people don't know that.
Right.
Um, they know that this is something that has a chance of killing them someday. You don't need to remind someone of that every visit. It's still okay to like laugh about stuff and have normal life stuff. And then if we see something on a scan that means we have to have a serious conversation about, hey, this is worrisome or hey, this is great, then obviously we have those conversations. But in between when things are going well, there's no need to
Right.
continuously remind someone they have cancer. Don't trust me, patients don't forget they have cancer.
No, I think once you step into the office, it is a brutal reminder of it, whether you're at the beginning stages or moving on. And I think that was one thing that I want to mention that was very important that you mentioned to me not too long ago was, all of a sudden you hear your stage and stage 4 seems like it is a immediate death sentence. And I remember what you said to me that there's a wide range of stage 4.
Hmm.
And I think that's so important for people to know because I didn't know that until you said it.
Yeah, I mean, Stage four for most cancers basically means that it spread outside the place that it started. So if you've got a breast cancer and it spread to a bone or a lung, if you've got a colon cancer and it spread to a liver, a stomach cancer that spread to the lining of the abdomen, like stage four is essentially spread beyond where it started. And there's a lot of flavors of that. You could have one spot, and you could have 50 spots. You could have one, two spots in a place that's easy to address. You could have 10 spots in a place that's really hard for us to deal with. And that's extremely different among patients. And then there's people's background on top of that. Some people, if you've got a bad liver from drinking your whole life, it's harder for us to give you the therapies that we would give a perfectly healthy patient.
Yeah.
And so there's, on top of the cancer itself, there's the person. Some people, they just have other things that make it harder for us to give them the same therapies. And so, yeah, I totally tell that to everybody that, most of the patients who walk into my clinic are stage four. That's just the nature of stomach and esophagus cancer in the US. But they're all very different.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, that was something that I didn't know. And that is the majority of people that I do talk to that have stomach cancers. They're all stage four.
Yeah.
And I think, that's something that, in the US, we're really good at screening for certain cancers, and then other cancers we're not at all. And I hope that, my primary, that, the next time someone goes in and complains about acid reflux and different stomach pains, that she'll push tests earlier, because hopefully I'm that example of, okay, now I know what sometimes maybe that means after it's prolonged, but we're not the best at finding things early for this disease, I feel like.
No, very much not, and very important area of research. In other countries like Korea and Japan, when you turn like 35, you start getting an endoscopy. And they have a lot of stage one and stage two stomach cancers, and those people are cured sometimes with even just endoscopic surgeries with the scope. And that's great. In the US, we don't have that, and so we're working to try to figure out, like, could we do blood tests that might put people in a higher risk, and then we tell those people to go get an endoscopy. Are there sort of other endoscopy approaches that might be not as invasive or expensive, so that we could screen more people? And this is a big area in the stomach and esophagus research world about, how do we do that? Because we totally recognize that, it's much easier to cure a stage one and two patient than it is a stage three and four patient. And I think we will get better. We and other people are working on some of these tests from blood, to see if we can identify people at risk or with earlier in their disease course. Um, and yeah, that's a big part of the future. It's really the only way to cure a lot more people is to detect it earlier.
Yeah. So, what makes you kind of the most excited about, and I guess you kind of touched upon it, but is that what you're most excited about, kind of thinking about the future and how the different treatments are evolving? Like, what makes you the most excited about where you see things are headed for not only stomach cancer, but just cancer in general?
Yeah, I think, early detection is no doubt going to be a huge part of the next, 5 to 15 years of cancer research. And it's probably going to translate into the biggest improvements. Um, but until then, obviously we have to deal with the patients we have, which are more advanced disease. So there's tons of work on, new targets and chipping away at our standards with newer drugs. And so I think in most cancers, thanks to better tools from science, we can dig deeper into the tumors, understand patients better. We actually are getting to a place where we have more targets. And so usually when we have more targets and we can expose a patient to multiple different approaches, maybe it's targeted therapy, maybe it's immune therapy, maybe it's chemotherapy, maybe it's some of these cell therapy and CAR T products. The more ways that you've come at killing a cancer cell, the better chance that one of them is going to work. we're really not that good at predicting what's going to be the best therapy. We use, like we were talking about, the markers on the tumors as sort of the initial guide. Um, but to get even more granular and more detail, some of these new things are going to help. And, like immune therapies kill cancer cells in one way, and chemotherapy kills cancer cell a different way, and targeted kill a different way. And, because we don't know which is going to work, we want to try all of them. And the future is that we have more stuff to try, and that's better for people.
Yeah, I think, just how far we've come, even you were talking about just for stomach cancers and other cancers, that you mentioned before, like even for some skin cancer, they don't even use chemo anymore. It's all immunotherapy. And
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. I mean, at least from my experience, there's a major difference on chemotherapy and immunotherapy and what it does to your body. And if we can get to a spot where, it's immunotherapy and things helping the cells as opposed to just, killing every good and bad thing in your body, that would be an amazing place to be.
Yeah, for sure. And even, forget about research that's about the tumor. We're also getting better at actually supporting people through the treatment. Like
Yeah.
10 years ago, some of the nausea meds we didn't have. And, the more that we can make people tolerate the therapies, the more therapy they're going to get. And usually the more therapy you get, the better you do. And so, some of the therapies are tough. If you can't feel your hands and you can't walk,
It's a
like
problem.
it's it's not so fun to be on treatment. So there's a lot of research into supportive care, and I think we're recognizing the importance of supportive care. This is a separate topic, but you know, sometimes if you just have intensive support, you get almost as much improvements as our drugs. So in a perfect world, if we could give like a social worker and a dietitian and a palliative care physician and you know um, a care coordinator for like every single patient, they would do better. There's no
Yeah.
doubt. We've proven that in studies. It's just we don't have the resources. And I saw some crazy number that there's like one dietitian for every like 1,000 cancer patients, like so it takes, a couple weeks to get to see that. It's all this stuff that if we could do better there, we'd probably do even better too.
Yeah. No, it is true. And I think we're super fortunate at MGH where, there is um a woman that comes around and does acupuncture and does massage therapy. And it's like even if she just like massages my feet and my toes for like that 5 minutes, it is worth its weight in gold for sure.
Yes. 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 Our clinic does not provide that. I'm glad we have the people in the infusion center. No, I agree. I 100% agree. I mean, those little things actually make a big difference. And we have, some of these questionnaires where you fill out symptom stuff so we can learn about where we can do better. Yeah, it's all very, very important.
Yeah, I think I do agree. I think it's an overall approach of all the things that really do help, and I feel like it's helped for me and helped for hopefully so many other people too. All right, here's my last question for you. What is your favorite thing about being an oncologist?
Ooh, favorite thing about being an oncologist. I mean, I think it's got to be the people. You just meet like the most interesting people, and you always meet them at a hard time in their life. It's a tough intersection finding out that you have a cancer. And, I enjoy the people. I mean, I love the research. It's the main reason I come to work is to do the research and work on the lab stuff and work on the clinical stuff. But I think the most fun part is probably the people. And it's the patients, but also, the people we get to work with too are also really smart, good ideas, help you think about stuff. But at the end of the day, it's probably the patients. I mean, people are crazy.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, and I think that's one thing that, if everyone that I talk to, whether it's someone that you work with or whether it's one of your patients or just someone that knows you, that's one thing that they always say is he is just the nicest guy that will go to bat and help anyone. And I think that's such an amazing thing for people to say about you. So I think you should be so proud about that, that people do recognize that in you for sure.
Yeah, I'll give credit to my mom who, reminded me that I was at the bottom of the totem pole, so I have to be nice to everybody.
Well, you do a fantastic job of that. She taught you. She taught you well. Well, thank
Um,
you so much for doing this with me today. I really, really appreciate your time. I'm so grateful for it. As you know, I'm so grateful for you, but definitely grateful that you spent a little bit of time with me today.
yeah, no, thanks for doing this. I think you're doing a great thing for the community and educating people, and obviously you've got a great perspective and story. So I'm happy, and I'll be eager to hear the version, and
Yeah,
we'll see you in clinic sometime soon.
you will. You will. And we want you to remember that with hardship can come ease, and that you can do amazing things with a little love, faith, and joy. Thank you for listening. Have a great, great day.